The Genius of Genesis, a Torah Shiur by Rabbi Broder, Part 1, Genesis. Good evening. The title of this Torah Shiur tonight, this Torah lecture, is The Genius of Genesis. The first part is simply called Genesis. Bereshit bara Elokim es hashamayim va'es haaretz. In the beginning, Elokim, God, created the heavens and the earth. This opening sentence in Genesis is a written record of the first divine revelation that took place between God and man. Elokim, God, informed Adam Horishon, the first man, the ancestor of mankind, that he is the God, the one and only God that created his universe. The universe in which we now live. And this belief in the creation of our world by this one and only God is the very bedrock of Orthodox Judaism. Now, this first sentence of Genesis, it is sublime, it is unambiguous, and it is also credible. I sometimes wish if only the rest of Genesis would be so simplistic, but it is not. The details of the creation in the beginning raise many doubts in our minds, and they pose many difficult questions. Does Genesis really say that God created this world, this magnificent world in which we live, in only 6 earth days? Did all those 6 days include a morning and an evening? There was no sun and moon in the first 3 days. As Genesis itself declares and records, the sun and the moon were only created on the 4th day. And how can Genesis use the parameters of evening and morning to define the time scale of an omnipresent deity? And if such parameters is used, to which time zone on earth is it related? Is it really a dogma of Judaism to believe that this infinite universe in which we live only came into existence a mere 6,000 years ago? These questions, and many others, demand and deserve a proper answer. They cannot just be ignored. And we cannot accept the naive premise that Genesis totally rejects the discoveries of science. I therefore believe that there is an interpretation of Genesis that will answer these questions. An interpretation that will not conflict with the discoveries of science. Yet, it will still confirm and even strengthen our belief in Shabbos. Moreover, it will underpin a facet of modern life that is essential essential to any global civilization, and that is an international dateline. And finally, it will confirm the genius of the language of Genesis. Now, this task will not be easy. This interpretation will have to overcome the barrier between science and religion. The barrier of dogma. And we all know how dogma can play havoc with even the most pure of empirical scientific research. Simple example, look at this diagram. A dogma postulated by Aristotle dominated the world of astronomy for almost 2,000 years. He said, all motion in space must follow the path of a perfect circle. Aristotle's law of motion, a perfect circle. During that period, astronomers trying to map out an accurate representation of the orbits of planets were constrained by that dogma. They knew that a planet had to go from place A to place B in a certain time. But what path did the planet take? According to Aristotle, it had to be part of a circle. But in fact, it was part of an ellipse. So astronomers, to make sure the planet arrived at the correct time, inserted a backward twirling movement into the planet's journey through space. These movements were called epicycles, and it ended up looking like this. Artistic, but absurd. Needless to say, the results were far from satisfactory. They might even be called loopy. In the 20th century, one philosopher, Arthur Koestler, summed up that loopy period like this. For nearly 2,000 years, mankind, he said, was sleepwalking in a trance induced by that dogma of Aristotle. Fortunately, in the 17th century, Sir Isaac Newton woke up the world from that trance. He dumped the epicycles into the dust heap of history and restored the paths of the planets to their true, simple elegance. And then said the world, and then there was light. And that light must be used to re-examine the language of Genesis. It was once said about Winston Churchill that to defeat Hitler, he mobilized the English language. Similarly today, to obtain an unbiased analysis of the Torah text, we have to mobilize the Hebrew language. And the first subject to be studied will be the use of cardinal and ordinal numbers. Ordinal numbers. Echad is a cardinal number. It simply means one. Rishon is an ordinal number. It means first. the word Rishon is used with a list of units to denote its primary place in a sequence of time or space. For example, on the first day of the 12-day period, a sequence in time, in which the princes brought their sacrifices to inaugurate the Mishkan, Torah uses these words, Bayom Horishon, on the very first day, Nachshon ben Aminadab brought his sacrifices to the Mishkan. Hebrew could not use the word Echad to record that first day, because Echad does not mean that day preceded the other 11 days. Therefore, it had to use the words Bayom HaRishon. This will become clearer in Yitzhak Hashem, please God, in the next diagram. Cardinal and ordinal numbers. Here we have a combination in the list of cardinal and ordinal numbers. We have 4 lists here: the rivers flowing from the Garden of Eden, sides of the ark. Torah tells us that rings were attached to the 2 sides of the ark. Tribes, in regards to the names of the tribes being engraved on the 2 shoham stones worn by the Kohen Gadol, and another list concerning the days of the week as set out in Bereshis, Genesis. Come back to the rivers. Torah tells us, Shem HaNoah HaEchad Pishon. The name of one of the rivers is Pishon. But then goes on to say the name of the second river is Gihon. Torah introduces the list by using the number Echad or Echad, but once it's introduced the list, then it goes on to the second one, Shem HaNoah HaSheni, HaNoah HaShlishi, the third one, and HaNoah HaRavi. Doesn't start off with HaRishon, the first river, because this river was not created before that river. Torah is simply telling us there is one river, the primary river, which is called Pishon, but then goes on to the ordinal mode, HaNoah HaSheni. Same with the sides of the ark. Torah tells us that rings were attached to both sides of the ark. Salo Ho'echos, it starts off by saying one side had a ring attached to it, and then goes on to the second side. Combination of cardinal and ordinal numbers. Same with the tribes. 6 of the tribes had their name engraved upon one stone. And then goes on, and 6 had their names engraved on the second stone, Hashenis. One would assume this list regarding today's had the same meaning. Yom Echad, a day 1, followed by Yom Sheni. But this does not mean that that day was created before this day. But there's another problem with this list. Yom Sheni, second, third day. When it comes to the 6th day, all of a sudden, there is a hay added to the number Shishi. Now, all these changes and differences and all these nuances must have a meaning. And in Yitzhak Hashem, we should try to explain them. These nuances must have some meaning. And it is pertinent to see how Rashi understood the word Echad. He says quite simply, Echad is not a number. It is a synonym for Hashem. for God. It means the day of a one. Likewise, Yom Sheni, or the day of the second, i.e. the angels. Rashi does not explain the meaning of the third day, the fourth day, and the fifth day. Obviously, Rashi is using a drush approach, a mystic approach to understanding the words of Genesis. It must be realized that Rashi wrote his commentary 1,000 years ago. He had no problems with the science and the knowledge of his times. He was only concerned with the spiritual message of the words of Genesis. We, however, want to approach Genesis through a Peshat approach, the literal meaning of the Hebrew words. And to achieve this, we must understand the true essence of the first revelation of God to man. Hashem is saying to the first man, Adam, I want you to manifest my presence to mankind through a weekly cycle of 7 days. 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. So Adam informed mankind that each day of that week, from day 1 to the 7th day, each day should be related to a different phase of my act of creation. Day 1, Vayhi, there was light. Light is understanding, an essential characteristic of mankind to know the difference between good and bad, true and false. You, Adam, will always be associated with the 6th day, and tomorrow, therefore, you will observe the first Shabbos. You will rest in order to reflect on and to honor my glory. Now, there is an extra dimension to this revelation. Look carefully how the first chapter in Bereshit in Genesis begins and how it ends. In the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and the earth. Vinei hoisos sohu vavohu, and behold, it was desolate and void. But Elohim developed his creation with the potential to be the perfect home for mankind. Vinei tov ma'od, and behold, it was very good. You, Adam, you are responsible to exploit that potential for the benefit of mankind. As it says, Asher bara Elokim la'asos. Elokim created his world, your world, in order to be further developed by mankind. As Diana Bramsky so elegantly translated the sentence from Ashrei, Dor, the Dor, Yeshabach Ma'asecho. Normally it's translated, Yeshabach, will praise. But there is another connotation to the word Yeshabach, which means improve. Each generation develops and enhances your work of creation. And that responsibility still exists today. Now, to develop this theme of Peshat further, we should take a look at 2 Meforshim, Ibn Ezra and the Baal HaMo'or. The Genius of Genesis, Part 3, Ibn Ezra and Baal HaMo'or, 2 masters of Peshat, a realistic analysis of the Torah text. Let's take a look at the Ibn Ezra. On the Pasuk, chapter 1, 26, Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Voke Yom HaShishi. And it was evening, and it was morning, Yom HaShishi, the sixth day. Now the Ibn Ezra is very concerned about this expression, Yom HaShishi. Why is there a hey by the number Shishi, unlike all the other numbers? And he comments as follows: Yom Shehu Shishi, the Yom Horishon, V'chein Yom Hashvi, the day that is 6 to the first day, and the same with the seventh day. Now, Torah does not make this observation with the second, third, fourth, and fifth day. It's pretty obvious. If you call something the second or the third, it's obviously connected with day one. So the words of the Ibn Ezra cannot mean that the sixth day is dependent upon day one. It is the very reverse. Ibn Ezra is saying that day one is dependent upon day 6. Why? Because day one had no sun, it had no moon, it had no man to whom it could anchor a time zone. Day 6 had both these parameters, and so did day 7. Therefore, day 1 is dependent upon the 6th day. It almost seems to be saying that day 6 preceded day 1. Now, let us take a look at Baal HaMa'or for an additional insight into the Peshat, the literal analysis of Genesis. Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Voke Yom Echad. And it was evening, and it was morning, Yom Echad, one day. The Baal HaMa'or makes the following comment on this pasuk. That evening, he said, must have followed Hashem's work during that day. And therefore day 1 would finish the next morning. As Torah states, there was morning, end of day 1. But we know the Jewish day starts in the evening, and it finishes the following evening as well. Hence, the Baal HaMa'or explains as follows. The phrases, it was evening and it was morning, are not in sequence. The two phrases are in parallel. Those periods of darkness and light occurred at the same time. When night occurs on the 0-degree meridian that passes through Greenwich, it is daytime on the 180-degree meridian that passes by New Zealand. Interestingly, this phrase about day and night is mentioned 6 times in the Torah. Torah is emphasizing that a day is measured not by the passage of 24 hours, it is measured by the passage of nighttime and daytime that occur at different times throughout the world. A day is related to the meridian on which it commences. Now, using the Baal HaMa'or and the insights of the Ibn Ezra, we can now understand better some of the enigmatic wording in the 2nd chapter of Genesis, which begins with the word Vayechulu. Vayechulu. Vayechulu Hashemayim v'ha'oretz v'chol tzva'om. and the heavens and the earth and all their hosts were completed. Then that chapter carries on with the words, Vayichal Elokim bayom hashvi'i, melachto asher asah, vayishbos bayom hashvi'i. And Elokim finished on the seventh day, bayom hashvi'i, the work which he had completed. And he rested by Yom Hashvi, and he rested on that seventh day. Now the next verse says as follows, Vayivorech Elokim, and Hashem blessed es Yom Hashvi. He blessed the seventh day. But this seventh day here is written without, there's no hay on the Yom. Here, by Yom, definite article, on the seventh day. Here as well, a definite article. Where is the definite article on the word Yom in front of Hashvi? Now you might say, well, you've got the word es here, and the word es takes off the hay from this word here. But we don't find this in Hebrew. For example, you have a posuk at the bottom here, Vaya es hamokom me'rachok. You have the word es, which is followed by a hay. So why is it that there's no hay on this word here? I think there's a simple explanation. This posuk here is talking about an omnipresent being. He was not concerned with different time zones in his global world. Hashem knows the precise moment when he began his work and when he finished his work. Therefore, Bayom Hashvi, on the seventh day. But in this verse here, Torah is writing that Hashem blessed es Yom Hashvi without the definite article attached to this word Yom, because in a sense it is a day that is not precisely defined. It is the day that man has established as the seventh day. But on which time zone? London, Paris, Jerusalem, New York, Canvey Island, Coney Island, Timbuktu? Every meridian generates its own unique day. So obviously, the phrase Es Yom Hashvi must refer to every time zone on the Earth's spherical circumference, and every Shabbos, wherever it is blessed by Hashem. Therefore, I believe it is fair to assume that since Yom HaShishi and Yom HaShvi refer to Earth days that are infinite in number, they cannot be used to define the time scale of Maaseh Bereshis, the creation in the beginning. I would like to conclude this shiur with the following comments. First, apart from Hebrew, I do not know of any other language that could convey this wealth of information with such lucidity and such economy of words. This skillful use of language is pure genius. It is the genius of Genesis. Secondly, these insights of the Baal Amor and the Ibn Ezra lead directly to the establishing of a dateline. But where? And by whose authority? this parallel of day and night occurs on all meridian circles. Well, they are infinite in number. Where should that first day commence? The Baal Hamor himself suggested it should involve the meridian passing through Jerusalem. But Jerusalem did not exist at the time that Hashem manifested himself to the ancestor of mankind, Adam Harishon. So who has the task of choosing this 180-degree meridian? Presumably, if all the above theories are correct, it is not the task of the Jewish nation. That task was given to Adam, to mankind, to the nations of the world. In the year 1884, the nations of the world agreed to the establishing of the dateline along the 180-degree meridian that runs alongside New Zealand. The cryptic, ingenious instructions in the opening words of Hashem's timeless Torah were finally fulfilled. Genesis declares to all mankind the undoubted divine origin of Torah and confirms the dictum of our sages, Moshe emes, Rosso emes, Moses is true, and his Torah is true as well. Thank you.